Okay, today we are talking about the English philosopher Thomas Hobbes and his social contract theory of morality and politics. And personally, I think it's impossible to understand Hobbes's project without understanding a little bit about his historical context, which is one of the richest and most complex periods of English history. Hobbes's major philosophical work emerged out of the English Civil Wars. In simplistic terms, the English Civil Wars began because Charles I, Charles Stuart, tried to run England without the involvement of Parliament. And Parliament is roughly the equivalent of America's Congress. We got the idea of Congress from Parliament. Charles also tried to impose a form of doctrine and church government and liturgy that Scottish Presbyterians and English Puritans viewed as popish and unbiblical. This eventually led to civil war between two sides led by Charles I on the one side and Parliament on the other. It would be like if the president and Congress each had armies that were fighting each other. Now, here's a quick rundown of the differences between the two sides. Charles I's base of support was the aristocracy, the landed gentry, called the Cavaliers. Parliament had some gentry on its side too, but its base of support was more with the commoners, nicknamed the Roundheads. Charles I believed in absolute monarchy, the idea that the king had total authority, unlimited, granted by God, not limited by the legislative branch of the government or even by the law. The parliamentarians naturally objected to this and believed in limited monarchy, where the parliament also had its own sphere of authority. Charles's side thought that it was always wrong to resist a king, even if he's a tyrant. The parliamentarian side thought that it was at least sometimes right to resist a tyrant. Charles wanted to make sure that he continued to control the Church of England, the Anglican Church. The Puritans and the parliamentarians, on the other hand, wanted a national church that was protected and supported by the government, but not ruled or controlled by it. The Anglican Church had always taken a middle way between Roman Catholicism and the kind of hardcore Reformed Protestantism exemplified by, say, John Calvin in Geneva or John Knox in Scotland. Furthermore, Charles was married to a French Roman Catholic, and many of his aristocratic supporters were Roman Catholic. Both of his sons, the future Charles II and James II, would become Roman Catholic. On the other hand, the parliamentarian side was allied with Puritans. They were the hot Protestants who wanted to purify the Anglican Church from what they saw as its remaining Roman Catholic elements. The Anglican Church's form of government is prelatical episcopacy, that is, the government of the church by bishops who are chosen by the king. The parliamentarian side was largely Presbyterian, and in Presbyterianism, the church is governed by elders who are elected by church members. And finally, in their theology, the Anglicans, allied with Charles, tended to be Arminian, and the Puritans were hardcore Calvinists. Those are two forms of Christian theology that it would take a long time to explain, but it's worth exploring if you have the chance, simply for the historical significance. Now, where was Hobbes in this big hot mess? Well, Hobbes worked for an aristocratic family, the Cavendishes, and so along with them, he strongly supported the king. He started publishing political philosophy in 1640, but lived in exile in France for the next decade while the civil wars raged. Those wars ended when Charles I was beheaded on January 30th, 1649. 2 years later, in 1651, Hobbes published Leviathan, his greatest and most famous work. The picture I've got on the PowerPoint is the beheading of Charles I in front of Whitehall Palace, the banqueting hall there. It's quite a place. Anyway, Leviathan made Hobbes perhaps the most hated philosopher of the century. Why? Well, in it, he defends absolute government, state control of all forms of speech and religion, and denies virtually any right to resist tyranny. So, the parliamentarians and the Puritans who are now running the country aren't going to like it. You might think that the royalists would have liked him, though. However, although Hobbes claims to be a faithful member of the Church of England, he denies the existence of any non-material beings. In traditional Christian theology, God is supposed to be a non-material being, a spirit. There are also supposed to be other non-material beings, like, say, everybody's supposed to have a soul that survives physical death, and there are supposed to be angels and demons and so forth. But Hobbes thinks if those things exist at all, they're physical beings. So everybody, Anglicans and Puritans, viewed him as an atheist or at best a super weird heretic. So he was banned from court and everybody wrote books against him. That's slightly oversimplified, but a lot of truth in that. However, as it turns out, Hobbes was on the cutting edge of the powerful secular trajectory of modern political thought and is an immensely important figure in that history. And we will see why in the next video.